Hello and thanks for joining us on the Monday edition of Journalists Hangout. I am Kemi Fola-Adeyemo. Okay, today on the program, Ize-Iyamu emerges winner as APC conducts Edo Governorship Primaries. This amid compliance with COVID-19 protocols. Plus, Boko Haram attacks Dalori IDP Camp 1 in Borno State. This comes as state government admits that 5 local government areas are inaccessible. Later on the show, police IRT team arrests 6 suspects over Isanlu bank robbery in Kogi State. I'll be hanging out today with Babajide, Kolade-Otitoju and Yomi, Owope. If you're ready, Journalists Hangout starts now. The COVID-19 pandemic to conduct a successful governorship primary election in Edo State. Osage Ize-Iyamu has now been declared winner of the primaries, becoming the APC candidate for the September the 19th election. Ize-Iyamu defeated 2 other aspirants who are Pius Odubu, who is a former deputy governor in the state, and Osaro Baze, who is the youngest of the aspirants. The exercise was conducted in strict compliance with COVID-19 protocols in the state. Let's hear from Mr. Ize-Iyamu.
Humbled by the overwhelming support and endorsement I've received from the 18 local governments. I don't take it lightly, and I want to give all the glory to God who has made today possible. And I'm so elated that there was no incident of violence in the 182 wards. God took control, and we were able to do the primaries without even violating the state government's COVID-19 regulation. Primaries led by His Excellency Uzodimma.
Pastor Ize-Iyamu there reacting to his victory at the just concluded Edo APC primaries. Okay, so this is the point I bring in my guests at this time. BKO, of course, thank you very much for joining us at this time. And Yomi Owope, good evening to you both. Let me begin with you, BKO. What do you make of the emergence of Ize-Iyamu? Many had said there didn't seem to be a contest in the first place.
Yes. I think increasingly the APC leaders wanted to ensure that the whole thing went without any form of rancor. And if you could get as many of the candidates as possible to step down, chances are that you will be able to stave off the usual litigations, that go with primary elections conducted by political parties in Nigeria. If you remember, the Ondo State primary election of the APC, the matter even went as far as the Supreme Court because Abraham, the contestant, was not convinced that he was well beaten. And there have been other primaries like that the matter went to court. The courts had to decide on who was the authentic candidate of the party. As we speak, even the PDP, the governorship primaries of the PDP in Kogi State, they are still in court. They would want the court to determine who indeed was the candidate of the party. And that's long after the election itself had been held.
Conducted.
So what they were trying to do was to ensure that as many as possible of the candidates stood down for Ize-Iyamu so that they can have a rancor-free exercise. And that's exactly what has happened. I believe that even for those who are in the contest, a decision had been made that Ize-Iyamu will be the standard bearer. So you can see the number of votes that recorded against the 2 other contestants. It shows that there was some form of unanimity amongst them.
Indeed. Yomi, Owope, what's your take in this developing story now? Were you surprised? Did you have expectations? Were they met today?
Well, I mean, this was already expected. We knew that it would come to this, especially once we saw that a number of candidates had begun stepping down for Pastor Ize-Iyamu. And of course, I mean, this is someone who has been in Edo State politics for over 20 years. And, he was the former chief of staff and also secretary to the state government, and also DG of former Governor Adams Oshomole's campaign, second-term campaign, and he's been very active in the state. 4 years ago he ran under another party. Now he has, finally gotten the ticket for the APC. So it was to be expected. APC needed someone who was strong to be able to stand for this election, which is why they also, began courting the friendship of Ize-Iyamu before now, and he did move to the party last year. And now, of course, he is the candidate that will be facing whoever emerges from the PDP camp. So I think it was expected at the end of the day. One thing that I'm very, most people are happy about, and also everybody's heaving a sigh of relief that there wasn't there's some rancor, there wasn't any violence. It was conducted in a peaceful atmosphere. There was they observed all the observed all the COVID-19 protocols and all of that. So I think it was a good one by the APC.
Well, Babajide, well, that said, now still on this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, of course, we've seen how the tolls, the death toll, of course, the entire toll itself. We see how it continues to read. Governor Obaseki had already, warned the party APC, that is, to ensure that all is smooth. Talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. So in your case now, was there really a point he meant to score, or how do you view the whole, warning as against what the party indeed did today to ensure that they didn't break any of these protocols?
No, his plan was to stop the party from having direct primaries, so that if he remained in the party, definitely indirect primaries will have favored him, because it's easier to reach the delegates than when you have direct primaries with so many of the candidates involved, so many of the party members involved. So he preferred the indirect primaries. When he saw that the national leadership of the party was insistent on having direct primaries, he then came up with that law and gazetted it, saying that there should be no convergence of people more than 20 at any particular point, except at the Owope Stadium, and that to have that kind of gathering, you needed to get clearance from the state government. But the APC leadership refused to seek for clearance from the state government. Their own belief was that, look, for this kind of exercise, we do not need the clearance of the state government. That is, if there was need for clearance, it was from the federal authorities that they will ask for clearance. So effectively, his effort to stop the direct primaries had been defeated. And of course, since it's in another party now, there's no point arguing about the method that the APC adopted, because it's in a different party now, and where he is, they are going to opt for the indirect means of picking their standard bearer. So effectively, I said it at that time that he will be disobeyed. Nobody will go and ask for permission from him. Nobody will go and say, look, it is Owope Stadium that we are going to have a convergence of our people for the primary. So across the wards in the state, they had elections. So there's no need to go and converge in a single place and pick their leader. So that's what they have done, and the standard bearer of the APC has emerged. So the PDP will begin now to see how they can organize their own primary election and ensure that it is also rancor-free, the way it has been rancor-free in the APC.
Do you see that occurring when the PDP, does its own version of this Edo primary ahead of the governorship election?
I mean, it is to be expected. I mean, this is a governor who has actually been at the forefront of this COVID-19 fight. He is a technocrat himself, so I'm sure that he would also want to set a good example. Now that APC has held a rancor-free primary that kept with all the protocols, sure. If they are now having their own indirect primaries, you expect that if you're converging at a particular location, social distancing is going to be maintained throughout this period. Everyone who is going to be at the stadium, if that's the location they use, will have a face mask on and all of that. So those protocols are very, very important to stem the spread of the disease, because it is still on. Now we've hit 20,000 cases across the country, sure. And Edo State is one of the states, of course, in this here in the south that has a large burden. So you don't want a large gathering of people that is then causing a widespread, the disease becoming widespread. So it's very, very key, very important that if there's going to be any kind of convergence of people, those protocols must be strictly observed.
Of course, this on one hand, looking at the drama that have been on the pipeline, we don't have time to go into that. But let's move on. We'll continue to monitor what happens in Edo State. And now, only those who wear shoes know how they pinch. Government officials in Borno State, that's the epicenter of insurgency in Nigeria's northeast, and now lamenting the effects of the Boko Haram insurgency on the state. So in the wake of resurgent attacks, the Boko Haram fighters attacked the Dalori internally displaced persons Camp 1 in Maiduguri. The attack lasted several hours as some troops exchanged fire with the insurgents. The state government admits that 5 local government areas are still inaccessible. The Commissioner for Chieftaincy and Emirates Affairs, Sugomei Mele, said they are waiting for security clearance to attend to the people in those areas. Let's hear from him.
You can recall that some years back, 20 out of 27 local governments are displaced. So, but with the security arrangement that we have in place, the military formations in that respective local governments, the police, the civilian JTF, the hunters, all, and including the trenching of the local government headquarters, that necessitated the returning back of this to their respective local governments. And when we have these very short assurances from the communities, from the security agencies, that these local governments are secured, those people can come back. We have put that assurances before we return that back those 23 local governments. The 4 local governments that we have not returned, we have not get clear assurances. That's why we didn't return them back. But for the failing of, if the secretary or head of department is key, we are not going for that, but that one is a local arrangement. I think I cannot come out to say this is the figure agreed. There is no specific figure agreed for paying of such compensation. Thank you so much.
That's Malam Sugomei Mele Borno speaking there, telling us, so giving us a sense of just how the situation is in Borno State, looking at the level of insurgency. So back to the studio here, BKO. This is one area that I know you're so passionate about. You've gone to see how things are for yourself over there. So looking at this Dalori, this will not be the first time there will be an attack. Why Dalori? And in the face of this lingering violence in the area, what's your take on the fight for Dalori, so to speak?
No, they wanted, if you look at what they did the last time, because they've attacked that IDP camp repeatedly. Sometimes it's simply to steal food and kill a few people. You know, right there in the Sambisa forest where a lot of them are camped, sometimes they go hungry. So they get involved in cattle rustling and outright stealing of food from not just IDPs, from communities not far away from where they are camped. So you go by what they did the last time. They came, stole grains that had been kept for the IDPs, and then they fled. So perhaps this was their mission yesterday. Boko Haram likes to attack in the night because they have night vision goggles. These night vision goggles were stolen from Nigerian troops during some of the attacks. So it gives them some form of advantage because when they attack at night, it looks like daylight because of the night vision goggles and infrared equipment at their disposal. So basically, in my view, that was why they came. They went to Dalori 1. There are 2 IDP camps in that location, Dalori 1 and 2. That's where some of the IDPs from Bama and some local governments not far away from that area, Konduga, some of them are. But in Borno State, in Maiduguri, there are 26 IDP camps, not less than 26 IDP camps. But the biggest IDP camp is in Monguno, because there are about 5 local governments. That's the IDP camp where about 5 people from about 5 local governments are staying. And those local governments, people are not in them. You know, people have fled. For example, Abadam, since November 2014, no one, I repeat, no one has had the courage to reside inside Abadam local government. The people of Abadam local government are resident now in Niger Republic. So it's like you can't find peace in your country, you've decided to go to Niger Republic. And the communities where they stay, about 80% of the people of Abadam, they are now staying in Tumor, Difa, Kinsaindi, and Gerin-Wanzam.
And all these are in Niger?
They are all in Niger Republic. In fact, when the governor donated palliatives, grains and the rest to people of Abadam, the House of Assembly member representing Abadam local government traveled to Niger Republic to share these palliatives to people there. This is not fiction. This is what happened. Then the governor of Borno State also went to Difa to distribute palliatives, including clothes for women. And during that distribution, there was a stampede because the people had been abandoned for so long in another man's country. So there was a stampede and about 3 or 4 of them died. So this is to give you an idea of what's going on. The president in his speech said that the people have returned home. This is far from the truth. There are millions of Borno people still in IDP camps within Nigeria and outside of our country. Some of them are in Cameroon. For example, there's a town called Ran. Ran is the local government of Kalabalge local government. It's been repeatedly attacked by Boko Haram. That was where that midwife, the one who was kidnapped and later murdered by Boko Haram, that was where she was picked up, you know. So Nigerians are now, they fled Ran and now went into Cameroon. They are now IDPs in Cameroon. So this is how bad it is.
Really bad.
Yeah, because those communities, a lot of the communities are not safe. So it's important that the governor of Borno State goes to the president by himself, because he was voted for by his people, to let the president know that this is how bad this situation is. So that the president hears from the true representative of the people the extent to which the people of Borno are suffering. They are still being killed. The war has not been won. Almost every day, I will tell you that between May and between late April and June, there were 101 attacks by Boko Haram in Borno State, recorded. Some of them, those attacks take place and not even recorded.
And that is just for me, that is very crucial. That is also very painful that we may not even get to see the extent of the violence residents of Borno who choose to remain, talk less of those who are outside, what they are still, putting up with. Okay, so from what I gather now from BKO now on this subject now, there does seem to be a resigning to fate on the part of the governor or the part of the leaders in the Northeast. How do you see this?
I mean, it's a really terrible and sad situation. According to the EU, there are now almost 3 million internally displaced persons in that area. That's a huge number.
Sure.
According to the US, almost 40,000 people have been killed since 2011 when this whole thing started. So I don't feel like it is time for us to resign to fate. We've said on this program that it feels sometimes like we live in two different countries, where in the south it looks like everything's quiet, everyone is moving on with their lives. As against in the same country, when you go to the northeast, especially in Borno State, it seems like it's a complete, total war zone. You have whole local governments that people cannot even go to. People cannot go home. Even elected officials cannot go back to their villages. They haven't been to their villages in years. So, but this is not, I don't think this is a time for us to resign to fate. I mean, we've had help from foreign governments before, even the European Union and the rest of them. We've had the multinational joint task force that I feel like we need to involve more of these countries. Right now, we have just about maybe 5 or 6 countries in the multinational joint task force. We need to involve countries like Libya, because they are not part of that joint task force. Countries like Mali have to be involved so that, a lot of this insurgency is brought on by foreign fighters, not just those that are in Nigeria or in Chad, foreign fighters that come from far away. Now, when there are more countries involved in this fight, I think we will have a better chance of stamping out this issue. We've had recurring attacks, even on this particular Dalori IDP camp. Recurring, it happened in 2016, 85 people were killed. It just looks like we're going around in circles and no solution at hand. But this is not the time to throw our hands up and say that, they've taken over, we've given up, let's just allow them carry on like business as usual. I don't think it's fair on those people that are there who are looking to the government to help them and save their lives.
Well, absolutely. I think that is also correct. But then only last week now, the defense headquarters, came out circulating a report about how they were able to attack a particular Boko Haram command, that they did this and that, of course, talking about their feats now. But that is versus what we are also seeing on ground, that there's still regular records of violence. At a point, from what reports said, the residents at the IDP camp in Dalori, I actually thought it was perhaps the army, going through their routine exercises, not knowing that it was actually another Boko Haram attack. But looking at what you said earlier, BKO, if Boko Haram, as it is now, ISWAP and all that, if they can still come out hungry, looking for food, it also gives you a sense that these people are indeed they're human, they can be tackled. But can we do that under our present forces? Can we do that?
No, of course they can be defeated. And I've said repeatedly that we cannot defeat them without the help of our neighbors. Some people imagine that I'm saying that because I think it's only Chad that can do it. Well, Chad, the truth is, Chad has a very capable army. I can say that anywhere. Because an army that defeated Muammar Gaddafi's Libyan forces, outflanked them, inflicted defeat on them in the late 80s, you cannot say they are not capable. And they have fought an insurgency for more than 40 years. So they are used to that terrain, tank warfare, it's a desert area, they are used to that kind of insurgency. So they have an advantage. I'm not saying they are better than our troops. Because when they listen to me, they misquote me. They say, Jide said they are better than our troops. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that we need to work effectively with them. Because the multinational joint task force, made up of countries of the Chad Basin, has never really been effective. They don't contribute enough troops. Funding is a big problem. So something that is not important. And, you know, for years, Boko Haram was going even to the headquarters, to Baga, where the JTF was located, to attack people. Because we never really got going with that fighting force. So, and even now, I don't think that cohesion between those countries is enough to defeat these people. Ideally, a terrorist group should not be able to take on 3 or 4 countries, you know, because they are taking on Cameroon, taking on Niger Republic, taking on Chad and Nigeria, and they have cells in all of these countries.
So should this MNJTF now, should we expand it? You've already identified rather, you know, cogent reasons now behind their ineffectiveness. So should we expand it, like bring in...
I don't think expanding it is even the issue. If it is well funded and those countries agree to come together and truly tame these guys, they would succeed. But that unanimity has never been there. It has never been there. So you will find that they are reluctant to contribute troops. That's why, how can Boko Haram go to the headquarters of the Multinational Joint Task Force and overrun it? But they did that in 2018 and held on to it for some time before Nigerian forces were able to take over the place. So it's because countries are reluctant to contribute troops. You ask yourself, how many troops have the Cameroonians contributed? It's Chad that appears to even bring troops. And even they too, they are not showing enough commitment to bring troops. Today you have some troops, the next time they are withdrawn and all that. So we can't defeat these guys with this kind of attitude. We must get, of course, Niger Republic is more or less a failed state. So I don't really want to talk about Niger. If we can come together, all of those countries can come together, we will defeat these people, and then the pain on Nigerians will reduce. You can imagine Monguno, from Maiduguri to Monguno, is a distance of 130 kilometers, but there are only 3 towns in the whole of that stretch where you can find people living. Just 3 towns. Tungoshe, Gajiram, and Gajigana. This is verifiable. Let people go out. Just 3 towns. In a distance of 130 kilometers. People have fled. People have fled. But we need our people to return to their ancestral homes. We need farmers to go back to their farms. But without security, they can't do that. There are entire local governments where you will not even find a single soldier, and you will not find anybody living there.
Yeah, I was coming to that, BK. You're talking about how effective this You're watching Journalists Hangout on TVC News. We're still on the subject of the recurring insurgency in the Northeast and Borno State in particular. It's been said that the mix of poverty, tensions, illicit networks, environment degradation are, some of the odds that the average Borno resident is faced with. And of course, Babajide, Kolade-Otitoju and Yomi Owope are still here in the studio with us to talk about, all these recurring problems. But what's on record has also been that the insurgency, now they're also facing infighting. So how do we use this, to our own advantage? If you could, address, the present leaders we have, even in the army and all the others now, how do we tackle this problem?
I think one of the things that we should continue to do, which we've done a little of before, but we must continue to do, is that we must study counterinsurgency in other countries, in other climes. For instance, the Taliban in Afghanistan, they were situated there from the 80s to the early 2000s when former President Bush invaded the country. And eventually what happened was that they had this US forces in Afghanistan that were trying to stamp out the Taliban. But again, they had to study the people, they had to study that environment itself, and then they discovered that there were camps and divisions within the Taliban. And so for those who were willing to then have a conversation and negotiate some kind of maybe exit out of that kind of situation, then it was possible to have that kind of conversation with them. But for Boko Haram, what you then have is a situation where when there's infighting, what then comes out that is maybe another camp of the Boko Haram is then even more deadly than what you had before. So it's almost like these are people you cannot negotiate with. These are people who they are horrible. When they attack villages, helpless, defenseless people, they kidnap women, they destroy villages. Even after stealing food and cattle, they are burning houses. So these are people that you don't necessarily negotiate with. This is a war. And as far as I am concerned, you need to go after these people and ensure that there is peace and safeguard the lives and properties of those people in that area. And this war can only be won if everyone involved, all the countries involved are united.
I think the producer was showing us pictures, and this is Monguno IDP camp. This is Monguno. During the last elections were held inside the IDP camps across the state. So it wasn't like, oh, those places were safe for elections to take place. The bulk of the elections in Borno State happened in the IDP camps. You know, so we have about 26 IDP camps in Maiduguri alone. But the biggest IDP camp is the Monguno IDP camp, because you know Borno North is largely unsafe. So the bulk of those people have moved to that IDP camp in Monguno. And even once you step out of Monguno, this is it, the Monguno IDP camp. Once you step out of that town, the communities around it are not safe. From Gajiram to Monguno now, Boko Haram, every day they go there simply to kidnap people. I've said it before, and somebody thinks that, oh, I'm exaggerating. The governor of Borno State is from a town called Zulum in Monguno local government. He has not been to his hometown since 2014. He's not the only one. Nobody.
So no one is left out.
Nobody has gone to that place since 2014. And the governor is probably watching me. It's not fiction. It is to tell you how terrible the situation is. And that situation has to be addressed. We have to do something quickly. If you find Kuka local government is the largest in Borno State, from Monguno to Baga, you won't find people resident in those communities, and it's about 75 kilometers, if I'm right. But 75 kilometers.
Like we were saying, so if you had an opportunity now, you know, to raise critical points for you in taming the insurgency in the Northeast, a dialogue with the Chief of Staff, the Chief of Army Staff, and even the President, and so, would you start from the super camp issue, or are there some other areas you feel we still haven't made any progress?
I don't believe in the super camps. The super camps have protected the soldiers a lot more, but not the citizens, because it has now left so many areas ungoverned, no presence of troops in many areas. You look at Guzamala local government, for example, the headquarters is Gudumbali. That is where Boko Haram killed almost, I think, about 160 soldiers in one day. The epitaph is still there to the memory of those soldiers. Nobody, not even a soldier, is in that whole local government. Nobody. It's just left like that. You know? So what I'm saying is we need to protect our people a lot more. If I have the opportunity to advise the Chief of Army Staff, what I will say to him is bring all your former commanders of Operation Lafia Dole, put them in one room, let them bring ideas about how this war can be won. We know some of them who did very well, you know, amongst them who are exceptional. I don't want to mention names so that they don't say that person is probably Jide's friend. But bring all of them, two heads are better than one. So at the end of the day, you will be able to come up with the right strategy to defeat these irresponsible terrorists. So that's what I would say. Maybe some of them would then suggest that, oh, we don't need this super camp. Let's come up with fresh initiatives and all that.
Yomi, what would it be for you now? Some have said we've even gone past the time when we ought to have disbanded the entire security chiefs and bring in a new set. Is that an issue for you, or can we still, deal with the present leadership? Can we use the present leadership to tackle the problem?
I think, the issue of the service chiefs really, it comes down to whoever the commander-in-chief is, and the commander-in-chief is the president of Nigeria. So I would, of course, leave the commander-in-chief to make the final decision regarding that. But with this issue of Boko Haram, I feel, when you look at it as a holistic and a global problem, then you can also begin to approach this in a manner that can begin to tackle the problems from the root. Everybody knows that war, for many people, is a business. There's no way that Boko Haram will get weapons if somebody is not, supplying those weapons to them. And we know that a lot of the weapons that they get come from a number of these neighboring countries as far as Libya. So if we're having a multinational approach, we should also involve those who are in faraway countries. The EU has expressed a little bit of some interest in helping us with this war, the US to a lesser degree, but I think we should get them all involved. If there are people who are on the international level who are, sponsoring some of these weapons and getting these weapons into the hands of the Boko Haram terrorists, that also needs to be addressed, because globally, the third biggest illicit business is the sale of arms. The first is drugs, the second is human beings, and then the third is arms. So arms is big business, and anywhere there's insurgency or there's war, arms would always find their way there. So on a global level, that also needs to be addressed. And then, of course, within the country, this issue of the service chief, I think we should leave that to the president.
Some have even also, talked about, if we look at the way these guys are operating as against Al-Shabaab in Somalia, there is hope on the part of the Nigerian forces, to tackle this. Now is the time before they become more resilient than they are already.
But the wet season is usually not the best time.
For the soldiers.
Boko Haram does a lot better during the wet season, because your heavy equipment cannot move freely, given the texture of the land.
Even with our high weaponry.
It's usually not the best time. They do very well. In terms of number of attacks, we usually experience far more attacks during the wet season. So all that we need to do, we must scale up that, because their own weapons are lighter. You understand? Their weapons are lighter. What do they really use? Gun trucks, anti-aircraft guns and all that. But we have tanks. We have armored vehicles. You can't move freely when in that area. So they exploit the area so well, and they are much more familiar. They've been in the bush for so long. So we have to make hay while the sun shines. We must stop underrating the enemy. I see some press statements by the army. I see clearly that they underrate the enemy. Yes, the enemy may not be wearing a helmet, he may not even be wearing a boot, but most times they are carrying the same weapon that you are carrying, and they use their population numbers as a kind of advantage. If they know that there are 50 soldiers at a location, they go there with about 100. That's what they did in Chibok. They clearly outnumbered the soldiers guarding the school, and they succeeded. So we should know that this is an enemy that is resilient, because it's an ideology. We should stop underrating the enemy. We should never give the impression that we've defeated the enemy when we have not defeated the enemy. Let's exterminate the enemy before we begin to talk like someone who has won the war. I've advised, because every Operation Lafia Dole commander begins to boast that, look, I'm going to finish these people off within a short time. And then you see that he doesn't achieve his aim. And then he leaves. Another person comes. We are still fighting them. So let's just be focused, and the president must give game-changing weapons to the army. If we have game-changing weapons, the soldiers would even be energized. Their morale will be higher. Provide them with what they need. Game-changing weapons. It happened in 2014 when just before the election in 2015, when Goodluck Jonathan was able to bring in the T-72 Russian tanks. That was a game changer. And of course, with the mercenaries that came from South Africa and their radar and all that, they had technology. They battled these guys with technology and were able to make good gains. Yeah, of course, we also brought in the Chadians at that time. They helped us to take some of those communities in Borno North. So, but in my view, we have to be far more determined, focused.
Than we are now.
Yes, keep our eyes on the ball. Stop giving the impression that the enemy has been defeated or weakened. Nigerians want to see evidence of that. And they will see the evidence when all of these multiple attacks stop happening. That happened in Sri Lanka. Anyone who says you can't defeat an insurgency is a liar. It's not a historian. It happened in Sri Lanka. Tamil Tongas were defeated, and after that we stopped hearing about them. And we can defeat these guys with
I
the
remember
right approach.
I was on this same desk, you know, when you talked about that. So indeed there is hope. There is hope on that. But for you, Yomi, what would be your final take on this subject? Of course, we've already said here that, you know, there are residents, you know, in this so-called 5 local governments where Boko Haram or these insurgents are in charge. So what would be your final take?
Look, my final take is that these are Nigerians that live in all these locations. There are Nigerians in IDP camps right now, 3 million of them. Let's think about the people who haven't been home in many years. Let's think about also the children who have not been able to go to school. You know, they've set up makeshift schools in some of these IDP camps, but you have millions of children that don't have access to school. People are keeping their girls at home. So you're talking about millions of girls that are growing up without access to any kind of education. So we have a future problem that is still growing from among the children and even the IDP camps that are presently existing. So there's a problem waiting for us in the future, not just this Boko Haram war that is being fought. So we must consider all these things before, even as we are fighting the war, so that we're not just sending these little boys and girls back to their homes without any kind of education, and then with the kind of poverty that already still exists in that area. All
right, gentlemen, we do hope that we have something positive to report on talking about the insurgency in the Northeast. But then we have to move on. Every day, they say, is for the thief, but just one day for the owner. Some gunmen, you'd recall, had a field day recently when they killed 8 policemen and a civilian in Kogi State. They had attacked a police station and a bank in Isanlu, Yagba East local government area of Kogi State. This occurred on June the 4th and, of course, throwing the community into mourning. But then the police IRT team has arrested 6 of these armed robbers. And, of course, the general demand now is that justice must be served on, of course, the people in Kogi State. BKO, of course, the governor, as soon as it happened, said, promised the necessary action on this matter. But for you, are we making progress on this matter with the arrest of the suspects?
Yeah, that's just clearly the beginning, and I expect the police to take it from there. It's unfortunate that that attack happened. Policemen were slaughtered like chicken inside a police facility. I mean, that's taking the war to the police, and I expect the Nigerian police to make examples out of the armed robbers who went to Isanlu. If they can't do that for the memory of those 9 policemen, then something is wrong with the Nigerian police. In terms of their investigation and the result of the investigation, they must make an example out of those guys. You can't go kill 9 policemen, including the DPO, and then expect to go scot-free. And I'm appealing to the IG now that if any politician puts pressure on him, because we know that in many of these cases, there is a thin line between political thuggery and armed robbery. Many times, these armed robbers graduated from political thuggery. They were people that politicians bought guns for. When they finish spending election money, they go back. They go to armed robbery. We've seen that with the offer robbery and many other cases. If any politician piles pressure on the IG he should show himself to be a man of honor by not succumbing to pressure. If he has arrested some politicians over this matter, then those politicians should not be released until the conclusion of investigation. There was a nursing mother from my village amongst those policemen. She had even been promoted. She was here to hang a new rank. And then she was just gone down in cold blood. Yes. So these guys must not escape justice. Nigerians are watching. You can't slaughter 9 policemen in cold blood and expect to get away with it. So the Nigerian police have a job to do. They have a job to do. And people are waiting to see how this whole thing will end.
Absolutely, and of course we are getting looking at the images now. Yes. Of that daredevil, very brazen action on the part of these criminals. And well, Yomi Owope, I reckon that another big challenge now on the part of the authorities is to ensure that Kogi doesn't end up, because already people have said it's a vulnerable state, it's a gateway, to so many outlets now. So the challenge now is to ensure that Kogi remains safe for residents and not a haven for criminals.
I mean, this is a really a key issue that we've discussed on this program. I mean, Kogi is bordered by several states, and it's also a major state that's in the middle belt with a good and huge population. One of the things that typically happens in states like this, especially with banks and other facilities in vulnerable areas, suburban areas, is that they're not as well protected as those in the larger towns. So the surveillance system needs to be improved. The alert systems also, especially for the banks where you know that there's cash, that also needs to be improved, because once you have a better surveillance system and a better alert system, even with the small local police station, once there's an alert system, it also is also triggered at the larger police station in the towns, and then you can track a number of these people. Look, what happens usually with armed robbers is that when there are deterrents in place, just like happened in Lagos, in the past, some 20 years ago, especially in the mid-90s, you had lots of robberies in Lagos. Brazen armed robberies taking place in Lagos before Operation Sweep and the rest of them. Brazen, crazy kind of armed robberies. But it was deterrence that made eventually all those broad daylight robberies. It was deterrence that made them reduce, and it's almost non-existent now. You hardly hear of bank robberies in Lagos. No. It's almost non-existent.
They can't escape.
It is surveillance. It is surveillance. It is alert systems that immediately, once it is ongoing, they're already surrounded. They are surrounded. So it's key. It's very, very important. And if you can do that in a state like Kogi State, even with the help of other states as well, you can stand.
All right. So these states now that we've seen it work are also in Nigeria. So this can be tamed indeed. So is funding the key for you? Are we seeing some states better funded? Are we seeing some? What's the picture like for you?
The truth is, armed robbers now, for bank robberies, they concentrate on semi-urban centers. They don't go to state capitals anymore. If we check the bank robberies that are taking place in Ondo, in Ekiti, no, they are not state capitals. They want to attack communities where they know they can easily get away. So if you are an armed robber, for example, you try to attack a bank in Abuja, then you can't escape. It happened the last time. They couldn't even leave the area. And you want to attack a bank in Lagos here, there's no way you can escape. All the access roads will be blocked. An Operation Sweep, with all the equipment that they have, the numerous vans that they have, they will encircle the area and you can't go. So they now focus on those rural settlements, because they know that if they attack those rural settlements, they
can get away.
Yes, they can easily get away. So we need to increase the number of police stations and mobile police units in the various states, so that once something happens, they can get reinforcement from a close-by police facility to go and save the situation.
Well, that said, gentlemen, I must thank you both, BKO and Yomi Owope, for your brilliant submissions on the program today. Thanks a lot indeed. And that's Journalists Hangout this evening. Join us tomorrow for another episode of the program. You can also watch the repeat broadcast tonight at 11 and watch Journalists Hangout on other platforms showing on the screen and on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. Our feedback channel remains Journalists Hangout at tvcnews.tv. Well, thanks a lot for watching. I am Kemi Fola-Adeyemo. Bye for now, and God bless Nigeria.